Hey guys, and welcome back to a new week of What's for Dinner. I'm really excited to share these meals with you guys because my mom, my dad, and my younger sister, they came into town to visit us from New Mexico, and I'm just so happy that they're here visiting, so I cooked for them. Also, my dad made me a new kitchen table out of his own hands. He made it for me and I'm just so excited about it. So I'm going to be showing you guys that here in my video. It's kind of like a surprise, I guess you could say. Also, I'm going to be introducing you guys to my mom, my dad, and sister. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this week of meals. And if you are new here, I'd love to have you over at my channel. So go ahead and subscribe down below the video. But let's go on to this week of meals. To get us started off, we made some chicken with spinach and a creamy Parmesan sauce, and this one is super delicious. So to begin, I'm just chopping up one white onion into really small pieces. Now that our onion is chopped, I'm going to begin chopping up our sun-dried tomatoes. So this recipe called for a small jar of sun-dried tomatoes. As you guys see, I have a Costco sized jar, so I pretty much just chopped up a half a cup of sun-dried tomatoes. I did want to mention I was making this meal not only for my husband, myself, I was making it for my mom, my sister, and my dad as well, so keep that in mind. And now I'm just going to be seasoning up our chicken tenderloins. I'm just seasoning it with a little bit of some salt, pepper, and some oregano on both sides. I did also want to let you know that this original recipe called for chicken breasts, but I thought chicken tenderloins would be super fun and easy to eat just because they're a little bit smaller, and that's all I had on hand. So if you want to make this and you have chicken breasts, go ahead and use chicken breasts if that's what you prefer. Moving over to my saucepan, I did oil it with a little bit of butter and some olive oil. I just put my chicken in. I did do this in batches just because, like I said before, I wasn't just cooking for my husband, myself, and my daughter. It was also my mom, my dad, and my sister, so I had to do it in 2 separate batches, but it still worked out perfect. So once that chicken was thoroughly cooked, I just removed it to a separate plate. Now let's go ahead and begin on our sauce for this recipe. So into the oils that I have left on the pan, I added in my onion and I let that get nice and soft. Once that was soft, I just minced in my garlic and stirred that around until the garlic became fragrant. I also did add in my teaspoon of oregano at this point, along with my sun-dried tomatoes, and I stirred that around for a minute and I let that simmer. And then you're just going to be adding from this point, you're going to be adding in your half a cup of some chicken broth. All I had on hand was veggie broth, so that's why I added. This recipe also calls for a half a cup of heavy cream. Of course, I didn't have any heavy cream and all of my stores were closed for the night, so I just added in a half a cup of milk along with my 1/3 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. I let this get up to a simmer, and once that was through simmering for about 2 minutes, I added in my cup of some spinach. I just broke that up nicely and I let that wilt down. Once it started to begin wilting down, I just added our chicken back in there just so that chicken warmed through and got all nice and saucy in the sauce. Here is my plate all plated up. I just served it on a bed of some white rice that I seasoned with a little bit of some broth and seasonings. This meal came out so good. I just served it alongside of a side salad, and I made some artisan bread for the night. This was a perfect meal. For this night's dinner, I made some spaghetti bolognese. To begin this recipe, I'm just chopping up 1½ white onions into super small pieces, along with 2 carrots and then 2 sticks of celery. Of course, you could add more or less carrots or celery, depending on how much you guys like. To my Dutch oven, I have about a tablespoon of some olive oil in there that I heated up. I just added in those vegetables and I kind of stirred those all together for about 5 minutes until they began to soften. Now that my vegetables are starting to soften up, I just added in my pound of some lean ground beef to this recipe. I do want to be honest with you guys, this recipe called for a half a pound of ground sausage along with a half a pound of ground beef, but you guys already know I only had ground beef on hand. Unfortunately, I didn't have any sausage. Now that my ground beef is thoroughly cooked and I drained out any of the excess grease, I just am going to start seasoning this up. So I'm just seasoning it with some salt and pepper to taste, along with 1/4 teaspoon of some dried sage and then 1/4 teaspoon of some dried rosemary. This recipe called for fresh rosemary or fresh sage if you had that on hand, but of course I didn't have any of that on hand, but I do want to grow that in my garden here soon. Now I'm just going to be adding in my cup of beef broth. If you guys really like cooking with some wine, you could add a cup of red wine in at this point. I just never really cook with wine. This next step couldn't get any easier. I'm just going to be adding in my 18-ounce can of some ground tomatoes. You could also use crushed tomatoes. And then I just stirred this all together, put my lid on, and let this simmer on a super low heat for about an hour. About 20 minutes before serving, I thought this sauce needed a little bit more pizzazz, so I went ahead and I added about 3 tablespoons of some fresh cut up basil. That is totally optional. If you don't have fresh basil, go ahead and skip that step. Before I get this plated up, I'm just going to boil up 10 ounces of spaghetti noodles, and then I just added it back in with my sauce and gave it a good old mixy mix. Here is my plate all plated up. Of course, I sprinkled some Parmesan on top, and then I served it alongside of a side salad. This meal was super delicious. One thing I would do differently next time that I suggest you guys do is instead of using the ground beef, definitely just use a pound of ground sausage, and I think it will give you guys the flavor I was looking for. For this meal, we made some Navajo tacos the way I like to make them. So to begin, I have been craving some pico de gallo, so I am just making some pico de gallo. Typically, pico de gallo is definitely not on Navajo tacos, but you know, I was craving it, so it was just an excuse for me to make it. So I am just chopping up about 4 tomatoes into small pieces, then I added it into my little bowl right here, and now I'm just adding in 1/2 of a jalapeno. I did dice this up pretty small. Go ahead and add more jalapeno if your family likes things spicy, but I just haven't been caring for spicy foods recently. And then I'm adding in 1/2 bunch of cilantro. I did take the stems off of the cilantro and I did chop them. And then I ended up adding in 1½ limes. You'll see me just adding in 1 lime, but then I went and tasted it and I thought it needed another 1/2 lime, so I squeezed 1/2 more lime in later. I also added in 1/2 of a red onion, diced very small. I just mixed this all together and then sprinkled it with a little bit of salt, put some cling wrap on top, and then placed this into my refrigerator while I started working on my Navajo tacos. For the bread of the Navajo tacos, which we are making right now, I'm just adding in 2 cups of all-purpose flour into my large bowl, along with about 3/4 teaspoon of salt, and then for my baking powder, just 3 teaspoons of that. Then you're just going to be adding in about 1 cup of some warm water. Then you're going to mix this all together, and you kind of want to make it into a ball. You don't want it too sticky, and you don't want it too dry, so just add more flour or water just so it becomes a nice ball, like I'll show you in a second. Now we're going to begin to work on our ground beef and bean mixture. So I'm just going to be cooking up a pound of some ground beef right here, and then I drained the grease once it was cooked through. And now to season it, I am just using the simple taco seasoning that I have on hand. Of course, you could go fancy and add cumin, chili powder, all of that jazz, but I was feeling lazy that night. Of course, I also added some water to go along with it. And then my favorite way of cooking up beans is in my ground beef. So I just added a can of drained and rinsed black and pinto beans, and then I just added them in with my ground beef, and then I just like to have that simmer together while I work on my next ingredients. Now we're just going to be working on our fry bread. So I have my rolling pin and I grabbed a little bit, kind of like a golf ball size of that dough, and then I just rolled it out and then I put it on my paper, and I did that again and again. One thing I want to let you guys know is always cut a small hole like that in the middle of your fry bread so that the air could escape through there while you are frying it. Now we're going to begin to fry these up. To be honest with you guys, this step intimidated me the very first time I ever made fry bread, but if I could do it, you could do it, I promise. So into my pan, I have about an inch of canola oil in there. I just fried this up on both sides. You want it nice and golden brown on each side. I did want to let you guys know you want to make sure your oil is hot enough. One way to see if it's hot enough is you could pull off a small piece of dough and put it in there, and if the dough is dancing around, then your oil is hot enough. These are all the super delicious toppings that I have for my Navajo taco, and here's my Navajo taco all plated up. Of course, I have the fry bread, the ground beef and bean mixture, sour cream, guacamole, cheese, pico de gallo, lime, you know, all of the fixings. This is such a good meal. I really do recommend making these. The hardest thing, I guess you could say, is making the fry bread. It just takes a little bit longer, but this is seriously such a fun meal you can make with your family. This meal might actually be my favorite meal out of the entire week. We made homemade ribs, potato salad, and some zucchini. So to begin, we're going to start on the rib rub first. This might sound like a lot of seasonings, but I'm just adding in 1/4 cup of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of paprika, 1 tablespoon of salt, a tablespoon of garlic powder, and then a sprinkle of chili powder. You know, like I said before, I haven't been feeling the whole chili powder seasoning recently, so you know, you could add more or less chili powder depending on how you guys feel. And then about a teaspoon of pepper, a teaspoon of onion powder, and then my little secret ingredient is just a dash of McCormick's Smokehouse maple seasoning. I totally understand if you guys don't have that on hand. That is an optional seasoning. That will not make or break this recipe. I just think it adds a little bit more flavor. Now I'm just going to be removing the membrane on each of my baby back ribs. This is how you remove the membrane if you don't know that yet. But the reason I like to do that is just because I think it gives these ribs a much better texture and it adds more flavor to the ribs with the seasoning on it, just because that extra layer is gone. But anyways, now I'm just going to be adding the dry rib on each of these ribs. I did want to let you guys know this is my dad's recipe for making ribs. In my opinion, he is the rib master. He always makes fantastic ribs when I go visit him at his house in New Mexico. My mom and dad both make amazing food. But anyways, I'm just going to be wrapping these very tight with some aluminum foil. Then I'm going to be tossing these on the grill. The way that my dad likes to grill these up is low and slow on the grill. That's how you make them kind of fall off the bone. So we had these on our barbecue grill for about 4 hours on a very low temperature. You do want to continue to check it because you don't want to overcook these. Now that our ribs are on the barbecue grill, I'm going to start on our potato salad recipe. This is actually my mom's recipe. It is the best recipe ever. I just think it is so, so delicious. So to begin, I have 11 medium-sized russet potatoes. I just peeled them up and chopped them into smaller pieces, and I put them in my large bowl, and I boiled these up on my stove. You want to make sure that you boil these. You don't want to make them too soft, but then again, they don't need to be too rock hard, so continue to check them with a fork until they are fork tender. Next, I just poured these into my strainer, and I let these cool in the strainer for about 10 minutes. Once they were cool and no longer steaming hot, I put them into a large bowl. Now I'm going to be chopping up my 1 white onion into very fine pieces, along with my 5 stalks of celery and my hard-boiled egg. You could add more or less hard-boiled egg depending on what you guys like. Unfortunately, I only had 2 hard-boiled eggs on that day, so I used one for inside of the potato salad and one as a topping to look pretty on top. Now into the big bowl with the potatoes in it, I'm just adding up our chopped celery, onion, and egg. And then I'm also going to be adding in a cup of some Italian dressing. And then I'm going to stir this all together and let it marinate in my fridge for about 2 hours. I also sprinkled some salt on top. This is what gives this potato salad so much flavor, letting this all marinate together. That Italian dressing kicks this up a notch. It's just so good. Now that our potato salad is just about done marinating in the fridge for 2 hours, I just went ahead and chopped up about 6 baby dill pickles and then our 1 hard-boiled egg. And that hard-boiled egg is seriously just to garnish on top and make it look pretty. To make this potato salad nice and creamy, I'm adding in a 1/2 cup of some sour cream, along with about 2 teaspoons of yellow mustard. I don't like potato salad too mustardy, so just be careful with the mustard. You don't want it too overpowering. And then along with about 3/4 cup of mayo. And then I added in a 1/4 cup of some dill pickle juice. I thought that was a little bit too much dill pickle juice, so I would probably lower that down by about 4 tablespoons of dill pickle juice next time. I mix this all together and then put this back into my refrigerator for a couple more hours, just until it gets nice and chilled all together, or until your dinner is ready. For our Parmesan zucchini that I made along the side of these ribs, I'm just going to show you guys how I make it. I never show you guys my sides, but I have 4 smaller size zucchinis right here. I chopped up into small pieces, and then into my casserole dish, I just added those zucchinis right in there. I just drizzled about a tablespoon of some olive oil onto my zucchinis, and I kind of wanted this kind of like a garlicky Parmesan feel, so I sprinkled a little bit of salt and pepper in there, and then I poured some garlic powder in there. I poured about a 1/2 teaspoon of some garlic powder in there, and then I also added some fresh minced garlic to give this a lot of fresh flavor. I also added in about a 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese. As you guys could see, I used 2 different types of Parmesan cheese, whatever I had left, and then I gave this a good stir, and I put this into my oven on 400 degrees for about 20 minutes. I stirred this very often just because you didn't want, some zucchinis to get more crispy than other zucchini pieces. Here are my ribs all cooked up. As you guys can see, they fall off the bone at this point. They're so yummy. But I'm just going to squeeze some barbecue sauce on top. I just used the Kraft slow simmered barbecue sauce, but you could use just whatever barbecue sauce you guys like, and I just brushed that on. And then I foiled these back up loosely for about 30 minutes to an hour so that barbecue sauce flavor gets infused. Here is my plate all plated up. I cannot express to you guys how yummy this meal was. It was the perfect summer barbecue type of meal. I love summer meals, if you guys can't tell already, but this was a great time and I was so happy to have my family in town. It is time to show you guys my family. So here's Brinley, of course. She's eating her dinner tonight. And then moving over here is my mom. Say hi. Hi. They're visiting from Albuquerque. It's my mom, my dad, and my sister. My sister's going to college here in Utah. Yes, so that's why they're up here. And then you guys know Will, my crazy husband. But anyways, we're just eating our barbecue. Do you guys like it?
Mm-hmm. Love it.
Okay, here is the moment everybody has been waiting for. Here is the kitchen table that my dad made for me. So I originally I asked him to make me a kitchen table because our old kitchen table was just like, I could show it to you guys, it just like was pretty much falling apart. It was just like really cheap. So I asked him to make me a kitchen table and he said yes, and he literally did this like in less than a month in New Mexico, and then he brought it all the way up here in his truck to me. So he originally said he was making me a table, and I've always wanted a bench to go with the table, but I didn't ask him for that because I was just like, that is way too much to ask for him, but he did it. He like did it anyways, even though I didn't even ask him. So he made a bench to go with the table, and I just think it is so pretty. Also, I got these placemats at IKEA. I just think they're super duper pretty and they go with the table. I also got this at IKEA, and this and this, and this is just to put like hot food on, you know, that type of thing. But I'm gonna show you the table without all this stuff on right now. Here is the kitchen table without anything on it, no placemats or anything. It is just so beautiful. I just love all these little knotty pieces, and also my dad made it so smooth. He really smoothed it out, so it's like very professional. Another thing I wanted to point out is that all 4 of these legs unscrew, so if we were to move anytime in the future, all we have to do is unscrew it from the backside and these legs come off. So it's just so much easier to move, also so we don't accidentally break the table. But another thing I wanted to mention is that these chairs didn't come with it. These are actually the chairs for our old table, but they're kind of like falling apart, like I said before. If you sit back on this one too much, it might like break on you, so that's kind of annoying. But I just love this table, and I have just really been staring at it a lot recently because it's just that pretty, and the fact that my dad made it for me just makes it so much more special. But anyways, let's get back to the what's for dinner video. I'm going to be showing you guys right now a raspberry dark chocolate homemade ice cream recipe, and it is just so yummy. To begin on this ice cream recipe, I'm just putting 2/3 cup of sugar into my bowl along with a pinch of some salt. The next thing you're going to be adding is about 1 1/4 cup of some whole milk, and then next you're going to be adding in your cup of heavy whipping cream, and then your teaspoon of some vanilla extract, and all you're going to really do is whisk this up together really good. Now all you're going to do is pour that creamy mixture into your ice cream maker. This is my ice cream maker I have right here. I actually got it for free at a furniture store because we spent a certain amount of money, but I love it. It's like a Coca-Cola classic one. It's really cute. But I just set it in there, put some rock salt in along with some other salt, and that just stops when it is ready. To begin on the dark chocolate raspberry part of this, I just have this Lindt chocolate right here, and I'm just going to be crushing it up into small pieces right here. I'm just using my knife to do so. You could also use a cheese grater to grate this very finely, but we kind of like larger chunks of chocolate in our ice cream. We just like the texture of that. So if you like larger chunks of chocolate in your ice cream, go ahead and do it this way. Otherwise, use a cheese grater. For the raspberries, I just have a cup of some frozen raspberries right here. Of course, you could use fresh raspberries, but my commissary did not have any fresh raspberries on hand, so I had to use frozen. And then I just added in about a tablespoon of sugar to that and mixed it all together, and that's all you do for the raspberries. So now that my ice cream is totally, completely stirred together and nice and thick, I just added in our frozen raspberries to that along with our chocolate pieces. And then I just actually mixed this together by hand. So I pulled it out and mixed it all together with my hand. And then here is how it turned out. This turned out so good. It's honestly my favorite ice cream of my entire life. It totally beats the grocery store ice cream. It just has so much great flavor. I'm so happy my parents introduced this ice cream recipe to me. I will use it a lot. And that is a wrap of this week's What's for Dinner. I hope you guys enjoyed it and got plenty of meal inspiration for your upcoming week. I hope you guys all have a wonderful, blessed week this week, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.